All right, folks, now let's talk about some troubleshooting steps. Remember, this info is for training only, not for actual maintenance on your aircraft. Only qualified and experienced technicians trained on this specific type of engine should handle any maintenance or repairs. If the following steps don't fix the issue, it's time to contact an authorized facility. Never return the engine to service until the problem is fixed. As we've covered earlier, an engine needs two things to run smoothly: spark and the right fuel-air mixture. Most problems usually boil down to a simple lack of one of these. Let's follow a systematic approach to troubleshooting. Fuel check. Start by checking the fuel supply in the tank. Look for any loose fittings. Check if the fuel filter is clogged. Examine the float chamber for any fouling. Spark check. Confirm there's a spark at the spark plugs. Now, some issues might need the touch of an experienced engine technician. Let's look at a few examples and their potential fixes. Engine keeps running with ignition off. Possible cause: overheating of the engine. Remedy: let the engine cool down by idling at around 2,000 engine RPM. Knocking underload. Possible cause: low octane rating of fuel. Remedy: switch to fuel with a higher octane rating. Possible cause: fuel starvation, lean mixture. Remedy: check the fuel supply. Exceeding maximum admissible engine speed. Reduce engine speed. Any overage must be recorded by the pilot in the logbook, mentioning the duration and extent of the overspeed. Exceeding maximum admissible cylinder head temperature. Reduce engine power to the minimum necessary. Perform a precautionary landing. Record any exceedings in the logbook stating the duration and extent of the excess temperature condition. Exceeding maximum admissible exhaust gas temperature. Reduce engine power to the minimum necessary. Carry out a precautionary landing. Pilot records any exceedance in the logbook, specifying the duration and extent of the excess temperature condition. Remember, this is just a basic guide. Always involve a qualified technician for more complex issues. Stay safe in the skies. Engine preservation. If your engine is going to sit idle for a while, you've got to take some steps to keep it in good shape. Heat, direct sunlight, corrosion, and residue buildup are all threats during storage, especially with water mixed in the fuel. After each flight, here's what you should do. Give the choke a momentary go before shutting off the engine. Seal off all engine openings, exhaust pipe, venting tube, air filter to keep out any dust or moisture. For storage lasting between 1 to 4 weeks, run the engine at an increased idle speed. After shutting down and securing against any accidental starts, remove air filters. Inject about 3 cubic cm of preservation oil into each carburetor's air intake. Restart the engine briefly at an increased idle speed for 10-15 seconds, then shut it down and secure those openings again. If you're storing the engine for longer, between 4 weeks and a year, similar steps as before, run at increased idle speed. This time, inject around 6 cubic cm of preservative oil into each carburetor's air intake. Once the engine's off, remove spark plugs and inject about 6 cubic cm of preservation oil into each cylinder. Slowly turn the crankshaft by hand a few times to lubricate the top end parts. Reinstall and retorque the spark plugs. Drain fuel from float chambers, fuel tank, and lines. If it's a liquid-cooled engine, drain the coolant to avoid freezing issues. Lubricate all carburetor linkages properly. Seal off all engine openings, exhaust pipe, venting tube, air intake to keep out moisture and foreign materials. Protect any external steel parts by giving them a spray with engine oil. Now, when it comes to maintenance for Jabiru engines, there are some unique practices you need to follow. Regularly check for oil, fuel, exhaust, and induction leaks. Keep the engine and compartment clean for inspection. Make sure the flywheel screws are tensioned to 24 foot-pounds. Keep an eye on the carburetor air filter and clean it regularly, especially in dusty conditions. Check the engine baffles and air ducts for condition and functionality. For cylinder compression checks, you've got 2 methods. One, compression gauge method. 2, use this with a compression tracer at specific engine oil temperatures and throttle positions. 2, low readings may mean a deeper check of engine parts is needed. Pressure differential test checks for pressure loss. It's a more thorough evaluation of rings, bore, head sealing, and valves. It's usually done with specific equipment and requires warm engine conditions. 1, identifying where air is escaping from the cylinder helps pinpoint problems. 2, blow-by through the crankcase vent might indicate worn rings or bore. 3, leaks from the carburetor might indicate a poor intake valve seal. 4, leaks from the exhaust might indicate a poor exhaust valve seal. 5, a head leak might suggest a poor head-to-cylinder seal. It's crucial to address any poor compression issues promptly to avoid serious engine damage. Continued operation with poor compression can lead to valve failure and damage to essential engine parts. Remember, always refer to the manufacturer's guidelines for maintenance. Lubrication system. Keeping the engine healthy means staying on top of a few things. First off, the oil and oil filter. Change them as per the manufacturer's recommendations. Ideally, switch out the oil filter every 50 hours or so. Drain the oil when the engine's warm. Watch out for any leaks and refill it with around 2.3 liters of the right oil. But never go above the maximum mark on the dipstick. Stick to registered brand oils that meet the specifications. It's key. When it comes to the oil cooler, no need to drain it every time you change the oil. That little bit of old oil there doesn't really mess with the new stuff. Plus, constantly messing with the hoses on the cooler can age them faster and even lead to them slipping off. Now, for carburetor adjustments and checks. Fine-tune the idle speed using the 7mm screw against the throttle lever. The standard idle mixture screw position should be about 1/4 turns out from fully seated. Adjust it for a smooth idle if needed. The carburetor automatically handles altitude changes, but if you're dealing with different propellers or extreme temperatures, an EGT gauge should be installed and monitored. Moving on to spark plugs. After removing plugs from a warm engine, you can gauge the engine's health from the plug tip. Light brown, all good. Black and sooty? Maybe a rich mixture. Check the choke and air filter. Oil covered? Might be too much oil in the combustion chamber. Look into worn piston rings and cylinder walls. Cleaning them? Use a plastic brush in solvent. No steel or brass brushes or sandblasting. Also, adjust the electrode gap if necessary. Check the exhaust system visually for security, damage, leaks, and overall condition. Make sure the nuts and bolts are snug and in good shape. Oh, and the head bolts, check their torque after 5 and 10 hours of operation, then yearly thereafter. Cold torque them to 20 lb. Tachometers can mess things up if they're not accurate. If the engine's behaving oddly, check the tachometer against a calibrated instrument. Lastly, those engine inspection charts? They're super handy, but make sure to read up on the requirements before using them. They'll keep your maintenance on track.